Rome, January 897. Inside the Basilica of St. John Lateran, the most powerful men in Christendom gather for a trial. But this is no ordinary trial. The accused sits slumped in a chair, silent, unmoving, his flesh rotting. Because the man on trial has been dead for 9 months. His name was Pope Formosus, and the current pope has dug up his corpse to put him on trial for crimes against the Church. What followed was one of the most grotesque spectacles in Catholic history. A trial so horrifying that the Church tried to erase it from the records. This is the story of the Cadaver Synod, the trial where a dead pope was judged, convicted, mutilated, and thrown into a river. This is the story history tried to forget. To understand how a corpse ended up on trial, we need to go back to the man when he was alive. Formosus was born around 816 in Rome. His name meant the handsome one. He rose through the ranks of the Catholic Church during one of the most violent and corrupt periods in its history. This was the Dark Ages, and the papacy was a prize worth killing for. Popes were poisoned, strangled, overthrown. The seat of St. Peter had become a throne of blood. Formosus was ambitious, cunning, a survivor. He became a cardinal, then a bishop. He served under multiple popes, navigating the treacherous politics of 9th century Rome, but Formosus wanted more. He wanted to be pope. In 891, his chance came. Pope Stephen V died. The cardinals gathered, and they elected Formosus as the new pope. He was 75 years old. Formosus took the papal throne with enemies on all sides. The noble families of Rome hated him. The Eastern Church distrusted him. Rival factions within the clergy plotted against him. But for 5 years, Formosus held power. He made alliances, he crowned kings, he excommunicated his enemies. He played the game of medieval politics with ruthless efficiency. But in 896, Formosus made a fatal mistake. He invited a foreign king, Arnulf of Carinthia, to invade Rome and become Holy Roman Emperor. This enraged the powerful Spoleto family, who controlled much of Italy. Before they could strike back, Formosus died. April 4, 896. Natural causes. He was 80 years old. His body was prepared according to church tradition. Dressed in papal robes, laid in a tomb beneath St. Peter's Basilica. And for 9 months, he rested in peace, but his enemies were not finished with him. January 897. A new pope sat on the throne. Pope Stephen VI. Stephen was a puppet of the Spoleto family. The same family Formosus had betrayed by inviting a foreign king to Rome, and they wanted revenge. But how do you punish a dead man? Pope Stephen had an answer, one that would shock the Christian world. He would put Formosus on trial. Stephen ordered the tomb opened. Guards descended into the crypt beneath St. Peter's Basilica. They found Formosus exactly as he'd been buried 9 months earlier, his body in an advanced state of decay. The corpse was wrapped in papal vestments, decomposing flesh, empty eye sockets. The smell of death filling the ancient vault. The guards lifted the body from its tomb. They carried the rotting corpse through the halls of the Vatican, past horrified priests, past the papal apartments, and into the Basilica of St. John Lateran. There, they dressed the corpse in full papal regalia. The robes, the crown, the staff. They propped the body upright in a chair. Like a king on a throne, the head lolled to one side, the hands positioned as if in prayer, a grotesque puppet of death. Pope Stephen VI took his seat as judge. Cardinals and bishops filled the chamber. Witnesses were called, accusations prepared. And the trial of Pope Formosus began. The charges were read aloud. Formosus was accused of perjury, of violating church law, of ascending to the papacy illegally, of betraying Rome to foreign invaders, capital crimes, each one punishable by excommunication, damnation, eternal hellfire. But Formosus could not defend himself, because he was a corpse. Pope Stephen appointed a deacon to speak for the dead pope, to answer the charges on behalf of the rotting body slumped in the chair. The deacon stood trembling. What could he say? How does one defend a corpse? He stammered weak denials, begged for mercy, pleaded that the trial was unholy, but Stephen ignored him. The trial was a show, a spectacle. The verdict had been decided before the corpse was even exhumed. Hour after hour, the accusations continued. Witnesses testified against Formosus, Enemies he had made in life now destroyed him in death. The corpse sat silent, judged by the living. Unable to speak, unable to move, and then Pope Stephen delivered his verdict, guilty, guilty on all charges. The punishment was swift and brutal. Pope Stephen rose from his throne. He approached the corpse of Formosus, and then he began to strip the body. The papal robes were torn away, the crown removed, the holy vestments ripped from the decomposing flesh. Formosus was declared never to have been pope. His 5 years of rule were erased. Every ordination he had performed was nullified. Every decree was voided. It was as if he had never existed. But Stephen wasn't finished. He ordered the corpse's fingers cut off. The 3 fingers of the right hand used to give blessings, the same fingers that had crowned kings and consecrated priests. Guards stepped forward with blades. They hacked through bone and rotted flesh. The fingers fell to the marble floor. The corpse was then dragged from the basilica, pulled through the streets of Rome like a criminal. A crowd gathered. Some watched in horror, others cheered. The spectacle was unlike anything Rome had ever seen. The body was taken to the Tiber River and thrown into the water. The corpse of Pope Formosus, weighted down by stones, sank beneath the surface, discarded like garbage, condemned to an unmarked grave in the river mud. But the story doesn't end there. Because the Tiber River did something unexpected, it gave Formosus back. Days later, fishermen found the body. It had washed up on the riverbank, still dressed in torn papal robes, the mutilated hand clearly visible. The fishermen recognized who it was, and they were terrified. Word spread through Rome. The corpse of Formosus had returned. Some saw it as a sign from God, a miracle, divine judgment against Pope Stephen and his sacrilege. A monk secretly retrieved the body and gave it a proper Christian burial in a hidden location. And then Rome turned against Stephen. The people rioted. The clergy revolted. The cardinals, who had sat silent during the trial, now denounced it as an abomination. Within months, Pope Stephen VI was arrested, stripped of his papal robes, thrown into prison, and in August 897, he was strangled to death in his cell. The next pope, Theodore II, declared the Cadaver Synod invalid. He ordered Formosus's body exhumed once again and reburied with full honors in St. Peter's Basilica. But the damage was done. The trial had exposed the depths of corruption in the medieval church. For centuries, the Catholic Church tried to erase the Cadaver Synod from history. It was too shameful, too grotesque, too embarrassing. But the record survived. We know what happened in that basilica in January 897. We know that a dead man was put on trial, convicted, mutilated, and discarded. The Cadaver Synod remains one of the darkest moments in church history. A reminder of what happens when power, hatred, and religion collide, a horror that history tried to forget. If you want more dark medieval mysteries and church scandals that were erased from history, subscribe to the Erased Archive. New videos every week.